Debunking all the arguments Muslims use to say Jesus is not God. God doesn't sleep, but Jesus slept. Psalm 121:4 says God never sleeps, but Jesus slept in the boat. Mark 4:38. But Jesus had a human body. Human's body requires sleep. But the thing is, even though he was the divine son, Jesus still was able to sustain the universe while his human body was taking rest. And then another argument is God is all-knowing, but Jesus did not know the hour. Matthew 24:36. Jesus says only the Father knows the day and the hour of his return. However, though, this is a voluntary limitation because this is Jesus' human nature. He functioned with human limits to be a true representative for us. But John 2:24-25 explicitly states Jesus knew all people and knew what was in man. This would mean Jesus possessed divine omniscience, but chose when to exercise it. And then another argument. God cannot be seen, but Jesus was seen. 1 Timothy 6:16 says, no one has seen God, but thousands saw Jesus. No one can see the divine essence, or this in this case, it would be the Spirit. But in the incarnation, the Son took a human form. That's why we're able to see him. Because humans cannot see metaphysical things. For example, you cannot see the wind itself or the essence, but the wind blows through a red silk scarf. You see the shape and movement of the wind via the scarf. Jesus would obviously be the visible image of the invisible God, or Colossians 1:15. And then another argument, this is the most popular one. Jesus prayed to God, and he also said, my God, that's what he cried out. But if Jesus is God, why is he reacting like this? However, we can simply just address this as Jesus being the prescription of the mediator. Jesus was a perfect man. He had a model of perfect dependence on the Father. His cry on the cross was a truth apt fulfillment of a human suffering under the weight of sin. Jesus was a sinless man. That's why he had to go on the cross and die for us and bear the weight of the world. So that's simply what it's referencing. It's just referencing Jesus' human nature once again. And then to debunk some more arguments, another one is John 5:30, where Jesus says, I can of myself do nothing. But if Jesus were God, he would be self-sufficient. But it's just referencing the relational prescription within the Trinity. Jesus isn't saying he lacks power. He's saying his will is in perfect unison with the Father's. That's why he acts as a human representative of someone who relies on God. Another argument they're going to try to argue is that God is self-sufficient, but Jesus needed food and water. However, Philippians 2:7 says he emptied himself and he took on it. And this would obviously mean he just took on a body or a nature that where he has these needs. That's why he needed to eat. That's why he needed food. It's referencing the prescription of the incarnation. That's what it's talking about. Another argument, God cannot be tempted, which is what James 1:13 says, but Jesus was tempted. However, Hebrews 4:15, that's what it says, right? But when something cannot be tempted, and because it lacks nothing and it's perfect, this would obviously be something that's divine. But a human can be tempted because it's finite and he can feel hunger or fear. Jesus had a real human nature. The temptations were real experiences for this human mind. Even though his divine nature made it impossible for him to actually sin. That's what it's talking about. So in short words, these are basically every single argument that a Muslim will try to use in an attempt to disprove Christianity. If you really want to learn more about the Bible and not some Reddit post or some Quora argument like for example, what I just talked about, you're always more than welcome to read the Bible for yourself. If you're going to talk about Christianity, at least be honest and don't take verses out of context to fit your own narrative.